Commodore was a significant participant in the development of the personal computer industry in the 70s, 80s and early 90s. But despite its phenomenal success as the maker of the world's best-selling computer, Commodore announced voluntary bankruptcy liquidation in May of 1994. A bunch of years ago I found this Amiga-looking Commodore PC listed on a popular auction site. I had never seen one before and I wasn't aware of its existence at the time. I obviously picked it up and I've actually never seen one for sale ever since. I think this seemingly extremely rare 486 might possibly be the very last real Commodore PC. I know there are other Commodore branded PCs that would like to claim the title, but I think they were just licensed generic products. I don't have much to go by, but I think this machine was actually made by Commodore. There is of course the slightly more common T48625C, but that machine has a much older look to it. I haven't been able to find any info online about what year those were made. The first obvious clue to that this might be a real Commodore is the design of the case. It looks like an Amiga 4000, but it's not quite the same case. So whoever designed the Amiga also designed this case. There are two stickers underneath the case. The text on the first sticker says Commodore Model C 486SX25, ID number 523901. But unfortunately no dates or FCC ID. The other sticker has a barcode and the specs. So we don't have a date on the case, but the chips inside the power supply and diskette drive are from late 1992. That means that this PC was probably produced in 1993. That's roughly 1 year before the liquidation. This is the second video about this Commodore. In the first video we didn't have the original motherboard, and I didn't know what board it was manufactured with. So we installed a Tech Media board that was very generously donated by a viewer. That board has an interesting story all by itself, and I will make a second video about it, as soon as I can find a matching Tech Media case. However, during the recording of part 1, I found two pictures online and was able to identify the motherboard. So in this video we are going to do what I promised in part 1. We are going to split this project in two and install what I think is the matching motherboard in the Commodore. But before we continue, I'd like to thank our sponsor PCBWay. Aside from making excellent PCBs, they also do CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, 3D printing and injection molding. Check out their shared projects page, where you can find some really cool projects for your vintage PC. Get an instant quote now at PCBWay.com. Okay, so this board seems to be an OEM board and doesn't have a brand name written anywhere. So I couldn't find any documentation for it. But let's see what we can figure out. There is a model number on the side here, and it says MB4S and 16, 20 and 25. I guess that's the speeds it was made for, but I hope we can surpass that. There are a few boards for sale online, and one of the sellers claims that it runs EDU RAM. So in this socket here, in the silk screen, it says 487SX. And the 487SX is a modified 486DX. It has one pin that disables the onboard SX, and it's made to upgrade system that has the 486SX soldered to the board, like in my IBM PS1. However, this board came with an SX in the socket, so that doesn't make much sense. In my PS1 we hacked the board and used the socket with a regular ODP. So that's one possibility here, but I don't think it's needed on this board. And then it says ADP23T, and that's an overdrive that was available in 40, 50 and 66 MHz speeds. And it seems to be a pretty rare beast. There is currently not a single chip listed on eBay. And then we've got a bunch of jumpers here. And we have some info in the silk screen here that tells us how to set the jumpers. So we can choose between the 486DX/P24 and 486SX. And in this socket here, in the silk screen, it says 486DX, 486SX, and 80p24. So I think we can use this board with some sort of DX2. And then we've got a 14 MHz crystal here, and a 50 MHz crystal in a socket here. So I think we need to try to replace that crystal and see if we can speed up this board a bit. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to try that. And next up we have a bunch of pin headers down here. So reset, turbo, turbo LED, key lock and speaker. And we've got one more pin header tucked in here that says clock switch. And I don't know what it's for. A quick Google search wasn't of much help, so if you know what it's for, please let me know. And then we've got a Samsung chip here, KSA3C206C. The keyboard controller, two GAL chips down here. And then we've got this chip here that says Solutions. And I don't recognize this logo. It's an 88C4386. And then we've got an Army BIOS for DX2 ISA. There is a sticker on the side here, but it doesn't give away the brand name, just the serial number. And on this side here we've got one jumper for color and mono, and then JP2 here, but unfortunately with no information about what it's for. And lastly we've got some bloody corrosion. So the damn Varta has started to spill its guts and made a bit of a mess of this board. However, this board was sold as tested and working, but we are gonna have to clean that mess up. But let's save that for later and start by testing out this board and see if it actually works. Okay, so let's start with something simple here. How about a 486SX25, like this Commodore came with? Okay, let's see if it will post. And it didn't. Crap. Let's try that VGA card in the different slots, because that slot is quite near to where the battery damage is. No, the board doesn't post. Crap. Well, that's not great. So let's try with a diagnostic card and see what it will tell us. Well, that's a lot of beeps, but then it continues. So let's swap that graphics card again and try out this Cirrus Logic. And we've got two beeps. The display woke up, and yeah, check this out. We've got a post. Excellent. So apparently a bit picky with the graphics card. Let me do a few tests off camera and see what that was all about. Well, I swapped back to the Trident card and now it works, so that was really weird. I'll do a few more tests and see if we can figure out what happened. Okay, so I moved the card around in different slots, and in the first slot here it doesn't work. So I had a closer look and there is some corrosion in the ISA slot. So we're gonna have to clean that up and get some deoxide inside that slot. But now at least it posts, so let's try with a different CPU. Okay, so let's change these jumpers to position 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. Let's try with a DX266. Let's try it out. Okay, so the board posts, that's good. Okay, so 8486, a numeric processor present. By the way, we have 4 megs of RAM, but this BIOS doesn't tell us what speed it runs. Okay, let's see if we can make that diskette drive run. Apparently there's something wrong. I just pulled the controller out of my stash. Don't even know if it's tested or not. It only makes was a faint seek sound, and then nothing more. I'm not even sure if that diskette is good. Let's try another one. I'm pretty sure this drive is good though. I guess I need to try with another controller. Okay, so I went for my stash with controllers from Computer Reset. And I hadn't noticed, but apparently there are all sorts of different brands. Although I found all of them in the same box. And this card is actually sitting on top of a couple of transistors. So let's move it and not crush them. So this one is a gold star. Let's try it out and see if it works. And yes, the board is trying to boot. So that gold star controller is good. Okay, let's run SpeedSys. That doesn't look too good. We're getting a score of a 386 DX40. That's quite a bit off. So something is wrong here. Okay, let's run Norton system information. And I'm having some really bad flickering today on the display. Anyways, Norton has detected a 486DX running at 50 MHz. So we've got 25 MHz with a clock multiplier. So we're doing pretty good. Let's check the CPU speed. And we're getting a really weird score here of 13.6. So something is messed up. That is definitely not correct. Yeah, something isn't quite right here. Okay, well, since that CPU was untested, I grabbed another CPU that is tested. And it just happened to be a DX4 ODPR 100. So let's see if we get normal scores with this. Well, obviously not at DX4 level, but... Okay, so now it's reporting 486DX at 76 MHz. Let's run the benchmarks. And we're still getting weird benchmarks. What's up with this? That looks about right. 486DX4. Internal CPU speed 66 MHz. Clock multiplier 3. Bus clock speed 22 MHz. So why did we get a weird score? Let's try 3D benchmarks. Oh, that is extremely slow. Now, we don't have a fancy graphics card. And we got an incredibly low score of 9.8. So something is really off here. So let's try this board with a 486DX and see what kind of scores we get. Okay, let's try Norton sysinfo again. And that CPU is a 486DX50, but we're obviously just running at 25 MHz because of that crystal. And yeah, it only reports 486DX 25 MHz, so that's perfectly normal. Let's try the benchmarks. And we're still getting those really weird numbers. That is so weird. Let's try 3D benchmarks. Okay, let's see what we get. And 6.8. That is just incredibly slow. That is way slower than an SX25. Well, I guess we could swap back to the SX25 and see how that behaves. Okay, the SX25 is back on the board. Let's try Norton sysinfo. Well, the info is correct. 486 SX25. Let's try the benchmark. Well, that is weird. Now we're getting slightly higher numbers. So, what am I doing wrong here? The silk screen is quite clear on the board. This board should take a 486DX. And the info about the jumpers is quite clear too. Well, we might as well run 3D benchmarks as well. 8.4. I was expecting something closer to 15. Although we only have 4 megs of RAM on the board. So I guess that could lower the score quite a bit. Okay, so I increased the RAM to 8 megs. Let's see if it makes any difference. Wow, that is such a bad score. We only got 7. Yeah, this is a pretty messed up board. And I'm kind of clueless to what it might be right now. Well, let's jump into BIOS and see if we can find any nasty wait states. That would of course not explain the behavior of the DX2. But we should get some normal numbers with that SX25. And no, the wait states are actually at 0. So that's not a problem either. Crap. And I just realized what might be the problem here. This board has a turbo switch, and on some motherboards the pin headers should be shorted to get a full speed. So let's try that. And we're back at 3D benchmarks. Let's see what scores we get. Haha, 18.1. So it was a bloody turbo switch. How could I miss it? Okay, so we are now at decent SX25 numbers. Let's move on and try the DX50 running at 25 MHz. Okay, so the DX250 in the socket. And it's still running at 18.1. Huh. That is weird. So I've got the jumper settings correctly set. And the board clearly states with the silk screen that it should take DX, but we're not getting any increased speed. What's going on here? And check this out. So I decided to try out the DX4 ODPR 100, and we're getting some improved scores, 34.4. So that's a bit weird. Why did we get the same score with the DX as with the SX? Well, time is up for this week, but this project is far from over. And since I'm behind with ordering parts for the other projects, I'll keep this Commodore on the bench and we'll continue next week. First we need to clean up that VARDA mess, and then we need to get it up and running with a hard drive and a CD-ROM. Ring the bell below if you want to get a notification. And needless to say, if you ever stumble upon one of these Commodores, please feel free to take the lid off and take a look inside, because we don't know what controller and graphics card it had originally. And if nothing else, you would need to get that damn VARDA out before it kills the board anyways. There is also the possibility that these machines were manufactured with a variety of boards and cards. But with the extremely limited run these must have had, I find it rather unlikely that they ever had the time to. The label underneath states that it should have a 312 MB hard drive, but I still don't know what brand. So this puzzle still has quite a few missing pieces, but we can use whatever parts I have at hand until we learn more about these Commodores. The scores we got may not be something to write home about, but it's a massive improvement from the SX25, and it's good enough to play tons of great games. But it's not about good enough, is it? So I'll order some crystals and we'll have a play with the speed of the board. And I am of course also looking forward to continuing the Tech Media projects. That board is really cool and deserves to be pushed to its limits. So I'll continue to look for a matching case, and if I find one for a reasonable price, I'll grab it so we can continue with that project too. Thank you for watching. If you want to support this channel, like, subscribe and leave a comment.